We're tuned into Recovery TV, the voice of hope, with your host, John J. Tassoni Jr. Discussions and information on addiction and mental health issues. Now, here's John and today's guest.
Welcome to Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. Narcan. Everyone should grab a box, keep it in your car. Ladies, put it in your bag. Gentlemen, leave it in your car. It's very much needed in Rhode Island. We're losing too many people on a daily basis. With that being said, my guest today is Mayor Brett Smiley from the City of Providence. Mayor, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And thank you for coming on. So I was watching an interview with yourself and a local TV station, and I saw in my eyes, I didn't know if I was hearing it right when it came on, but you're in recovery.
That's right.
Tell me about it.
So I've been in long-term recovery for now 22 years,
Wow.
which is kind of crazy.
Amazing.
How fast that goes. And you know, it's a big part of who I am. I actively used drugs and alcohol through my college years, and took a little while for me to realize that addiction can be just as real for someone in their young 20s when all of your peers around you might be taking behaviors and doing things that it doesn't really seem that far out of the norm when you're 22 years old.
Right.
But it wasn't so much what or how much I was using, it was why and how I felt on the inside. And thankfully, I reached out for help. I got that help and engaged in a program of recovery and found a community of people in recovery that supported me through those early days and have become a big part of sort of the life skills that I have today, the community that I have today, and in many cases the values that I have today. And so it's not something I talk a ton about, but it's not something I've ever been dishonest about either. And with this new job now as Mayor of Providence, I decided that in Recovery Month this September that I probably should share my story with the hope that maybe it would provide some hope for someone else.
You know, you bring up a very good point, because my tagline is hope and recovery. You know, many people that I've talked to that are in residential treatment programs, whether they're in line waiting to get their outpatient stuff that they need, they don't think that. They don't think that there's hope. They just think that's it, I'm headed down a path where there's no return. But, you know, a gentleman your stature, going from being in long-term recovery to being the mayor of the City of Providence, that's a big deal. You may not think it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal, but the people that watch this show are going to say, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Brett Smiley?"
Yeah, I've learned over these last 2 decades, an addict or an alcoholic or someone who's struggling with addiction doesn't look like just one thing or another. Right? We look like everything. You know, I think there's still some stigma and some prejudice about what an addict looks like. An addict looks like me. An addict could look like you, and it could look like anyone else that you pass on the street. And so I think that that's important for people to know. The other thing that I think is important for people to know, and for people who might be currently in a treatment facility or someone who has a loved one that they care about, and I speak just from my own personal experience, is that everyone can find recovery, but everyone finds it a little bit differently and in a different time frame. And I've known people who stopped using and found recovery the first time. And then I've known people that it took 20 times. And there doesn't seem to be, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's not a certain type of people get it right away, or a certain, you know, socioeconomic status a person gets it right away. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And so, you know, I'm glad you led with Narcan. I mean, part of the reason that we, as a public policy, put so much emphasis and resources into, you know, what we refer to as harm reduction, which is you know, Narcan and other strategies, which is just keeping people alive, is with the hope that maybe that person who we've revived from an overdose gets it next time. It's just to keep them alive until they can find recovery. And maybe it'll be that time. Sadly, maybe it'll be 20 more times.
Right.
But we want to give them as many opportunities as possible, because that's what happens. And I have met a lot of people who said, like, I've done this so many times, I'm never going to get it. That's just not true.
Right.
It's just not true. There's no guarantee,
Right.
but there's no magic number either. And so just keep trying.
Yeah, you know, there's so many people that I talk to when I'm out in public. They say, why do you do what you do? Why do you talk to those addicts? Why do you talk to that drunk? Well, you know what? They're individuals.
Yeah.
They're people. It could be your brother, your sister, your mother, your aunt, your uncle.
Right.
You know, they're human beings, and they don't get that. And to get to your point about stigma,
Yeah.
you know, they say because they see somebody on the street, well, that guy's a bum, he's a drug user. But you know what? They're people.
Right.
We got to try to help. Some people want help, and there's some people that don't want help. But
I
we
would-
have to give them the opportunity
Absolutely.
to get them help, to become productive citizens again, to get them hopefully off the system, and they're working, and they have a family, and they move on.
You know, you're a few years older than me.
Just a few.
Not many. But even, you know, in my decade of public service and 20 years of continuous recovery, I've sensed that the amount of stigma has decreased.
Right.
And hopefully, whether you're struggling or you've got a family member who's struggling, you can recognize that things are getting better. It's talked about much more. There are more resources than ever. And I think what has changed, sadly, is that almost everybody knows somebody struggling now.
It's funny you say that.
Unfortunately, everybody knows somebody who's died.
Yeah.
And so the stigma is decreasing, and all of us have a personal connection. Whether you know it or not, there's a member of your family who's struggling with addiction, or extended family.
Yeah, you know what,
Yeah.
Mayor? When I got into this business, it was 1 in 5 folks. Now we're down to 1 in 1. And I tell people all the time, I'm tired of going to funerals.
Yeah.
I'm tired of going to wakes and
Yeah.
see a parent at the end of the line or the beginning of the line uncontrollably saddened by her son, her daughter, who died.
Right.
It's not fun. It's not fun. But I put my head on the pillow every night knowing that I tried.
Right.
I tried. I can't save everyone, but I try. And it's a big deal now today that the stigma has been reduced,
Yes.
not to where we like to see
There's
it.
more work to be done.
There's
but
more
it is
work to be
better.
done. The harm reduction needs to be helped. That's another thing I get kicked around about, is this harm reduction, about opening up a facility. But I want to talk more about that when we come back.
Yeah,
We're
great.
going to take a break so I can pay the bills. You're watching Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. We'll be right back after these messages with Mayor Brett Smiley.
And now, back to Recovery TV with your host, John J. Tassoni Jr. Recovery TV is made possible by our supporting sponsors and our title sponsor, AdCare. Now, here's John and today's guest.
Welcome back to Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. The Mayor of the City of Providence, Brett Smiley, is in the house. Welcome,
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Thank you for joining us today. You know, a lot of people talk about political figures, good and bad, as we both know it. The City of Providence, there's been talk about having harm reduction put in the city. Where do you see that stand at this point?
So they're working hard to find the right site. I think the physical location matters a lot.
Right.
And so I'm glad they're taking their time to find the right spot, and then there's got to be community engagement to take place once they do locate that space. You know, I'll confess, I had some apprehension, some questions about it, but I've become comfortable with having the facility in Providence, giving it a try. It's a little bit like the conversation we were having earlier, which is people are dying, and I think it's worth trying whatever we can to keep them alive. And these facilities in other places in the country and other places around the world have a fair amount of data behind them now that they do in fact help keep people alive. Whether it's harm reduction, overdose prevention center, or things as simple as Narcan, one of the things that's really important to me, and I think this is partially informed by my lived experience, which is I feel like sometimes the conversation is just about harm reduction, and it's critical. We can't do all the other stuff if people die, but it needs to be about more than that. It's not just about keeping people from overdosing. It's about helping them find recovery. And we want anybody who's struggling. Of all the addicts that I've met in my life, there may be moments, but generally speaking, they're not happy about the addiction that they find themselves in the grips of. That's not their aspiration. And so it's about keeping people alive so that we can help them find a path to recovery and to fulfilling whatever their aspirations in life might be. And if the Harm Reduction Center or the Overdose Prevention Center, which it's being called, is a way to do that, I think it's worth trying.
I was involved in those discussions in the beginning, and it wasn't going well. Until I made a suggestion about doing a pilot program to see if it works. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, well, then you fold your tent and you move on to something else. But you bring up a very good point. No one wakes up and says, well, you know what, maybe I'll be an alcoholic today. Maybe I'll be a drug user today. Maybe I'll go commit suicide today. No one really does that until you bring them to a point of, I don't know if I can turn my life around. I don't, so I'm going to keep using. I'm going to keep drinking. I'm thinking of maybe going and commit suicide. And it boils to a point where people make the decisions. Sometimes they make the right decision, but what we're seeing now, it's the wrong decision. And more information needs to be brought to the forefront, and more studies need to be done, and more people need to be helped. You could tell me, and you can call me tomorrow and say, John, I need a bed. And I'm going to say, Mayor, can you wait 5 days?
Right.
That's not an answer. As you well know, when you want to go, and you pick up the phone and call me, you want to go. You don't want to go 5 days from now. You want to go now.
That's right.
You want to go now. And that's the problem that I don't think people see. I mean, the people that are in it to win it see it, but the general public doesn't see it. And I think when people see this show and they see a gentleman of your stature being a mayor coming up forward, it's going to bring light to the whole situation. Because I had Chris Herron on. I mean, the amount of viewers blew up.
Yeah.
Blew up.
He's been a great advocate.
And I'm in the process right now of trying to get the Boston Bruins to have the coach sit here. He's in recovery. So people that are high influential people will get people to the point where they say, I'm ready. I want to go. I saw Brett Smiley on John Tassoni's show. He did it. I can do it.
I've seen everybody, all walks of life, be able to find recovery. There's no guarantee, and you got to do the work, but there is a support system of people ready to help. And the community that I found in recovery that I know is out there for anyone who wants to grab it are some of the most selfless, giving people. And what we learn, what I certainly learned, is that actually my recovery gets stronger by helping someone else find recovery.
Exactly.
And so for anyone who's thinking about asking for help, and if you have someone in your life who is in recovery or has been exposed to some of the tools or resources that are available, don't think that you're placing a burden on them for asking for help. Don't think that it's an imposition, that you couldn't possibly, they're very busy, all the excuses you might make for why they might not want to help. Put that aside, because what I have found, and I know it's consistent with other people, is that it actually puts me in a better place in my recovery by helping someone else who needs help. And so you might actually be helping that friend by asking for help yourself. And so there's a lot of people who are nervous for all kinds of reasons, but mostly in your own head about sticking your hand up and asking for help, but I would just encourage people to do that if you're at that place. And for the broader community, to your point, I think you're absolutely right about having to make sure that resources are available when they're needed. There is a moment where the door of willingness cracks open. For a very few number of people, it swings wide open, but for most people, it's just barely cracked open. Right. And you have to have resources available so that you can walk through that door whenever that door might crack open, because you don't know when it's going to be. So whether that's a residential treatment bed at a hospital, or a peer recovery coach, or the BH Link support line 988, just making sure that whenever that might come, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that there's someone who can answer the call for when that door of willingness cracks open, and that is worthy of our support, whether as a taxpayer, as a voter, as a neighbor or a resident. That is something we should all invest in, because I can assure you that if this were your son or daughter, brother or sister, you'd want that resource available to them when that door cracks open.
Right. And you know, the most rewarding out of all of this is when a mom or a dad picks up the phone and says, thank you. Thank you. You did it. You did it. I didn't do it. All I had was availability for a bed.
Right.
Your son or daughter did it. I'm going to take a quick break. You're watching Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. We'll be right back with the Mayor of Providence, Mr. Brett Smiley, right after these messages.
And now, back to Recovery TV with your host, John J. Tassoni Jr. Recovery TV is made possible by our supporting sponsors and our title sponsor, AdCare. Now, here's John and today's guest.
Welcome back to Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. Mayor Brett Smiley of the City of Providence has been my guest. Mayor, thank you for coming on.
It's been great.
Really appreciate you. I know you're a busy guy, and to fit 25, 30 minutes in has been great.
This is an important topic.
So what are you doing in the City of Providence? There's been a lot of money brought into cities and towns to help with the problem. What are you guys doing?
So we have a pretty comprehensive approach. We have a full-scale addiction and recovery action plan led by our Human Services Department. In the harm reduction space, the Providence Fire Department is all been actively trained. They're actually very progressive in their approach to addiction in the city. All of our fire stations are referred to as safe stations, which means that you can come in asking for help. We have harm reduction supplies there, and we do a lot of work with partners in the harm reduction space as well, including the Overdose Prevention Center, other social service partners. In the education space, we have the Mayor's Council on Behavioral Health that runs a youth program that brings providers together, that uses the city's convening powers to make sure that we're coordinating service delivery, both services that the city delivers and services that private partners deliver. And then in the recovery space, we have a comprehensive recovery support plan that is being finalized right now. Not surprising, apropos of the conversation we've been having, it was an area that I felt was a little thinner than the harm reduction part, and so we've sought to beef that up and are working with community providers to tell us what they need. We have access to some of the opioid settlement funds. We have other dedicated city funds that I want to make sure that we are investing as heavily in recovery as we are in harm reduction. But it's really kind of across the spectrum of harm reduction, education, and recovery, all funded with both city funds and opioid settlement funds to make sure that we're doing what we can to serve our community. Obviously, Providence, as the biggest city, as the capital city, bears a disproportionate burden in terms of servicing those who are most in need. And so we're really trying to do all we can.
Well, Mayor, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on my show today and congratulate you on your 22 years of sobriety and being in recovery. I really appreciate what you have done for the city and what you're going to do for the city. So again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, John.
So you've been watching Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. This is Gambling Month. Call 1-877-9-GAMBLE if you have an issue. We'll see you next week.